One of the biggest things I've been thinking about recently, since I'm soon to be graduating, is whether I want to apply for jobs that are more agency or if I want to apply for corporate jobs. Throughout the summer, we've had a lot of fun field trips and cool experiences and talks with business professionals who work in these fields. And today we just kind of want to provide some context so that may help answer the question for you. I'm Connor Walsh. I'm a senior here at UW Oshkosh, and I'm an interactive web management major.
My name is Megan. I also am a senior at UW Oshkosh, and I am studying marketing.
And then my name is Ella, also going into my senior year, so super scary, but super exciting too. And I'm also a marketing major.
So throughout the summer, Megan and I have been doing an internship at the Digital Marketing Clinic, which is more formatted as an agency, and Ella has been partaking in an internship over at Plexus, which is more leaning corporate. So throughout today, we're just gonna weigh the pros and cons of having a job in each of these areas and try to help you answer the question as well. As graduating students ourselves, we're thinking that we'll be able to answer it pretty well. Something to consider when thinking about what kind of jobs you want to be applying for is the type of environment you're looking for. From what we've been hearing, agencies are typically more fast-paced and corporations are more slow-paced or not as fast as the agency. Ella, since you've had some experience working at the Digital Marketing Clinic and over the past summer you've been working at Plexus, do you kind of find that true? Like, did you notice that pace shift?
I think when it comes to corporate, it kind of depends on the project that you're working on currently.
Mm-hmm.
Like there were some projects where it was like, oh, done by the day, and then some where they've been spanning for like months at a time.
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of just depends on what you're doing, and there's also just like a lot of variety, and then there's a lot of things that go on like at the same time as well.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're not funneling everything into just one topic. You're going through a lot of things throughout the day, and some are really slow paced and some are really fast paced. It just kind of depends, and then it's all about the drafts along the way too.
Mm-hmm.
So you might want to have your final draft done, have somebody review it, and that is a huge chunk of the process as well, and that also takes time. So it just is about that variety that you can see with the timing.
Again, do you kind of find that variety happening at the clinic as well, like the more agency format? Do you find yourself doing a lot of variety more long term, or what does the workflow kind of look like for you?
Yeah, I think the variety is definitely still present. It's just a different look, for sure. I mean, you guys have all of the same projects, but it's for the same business. It's for the same client, which is like who you're working for. Which, as for us, it's like we have that variety, but it's for different clients. And so that's kind of where the fast pace comes in, where you have to get done, all these certain clients at the same deadline.
Right.
But you only have, yourself to work on it throughout the, the same working hour day. So, but definitely there are times where you, have like that slow pace of just, longer deadline. But, for us, it's like, it's all the same, whereas,
Right.
It's not as spread out, so.
I think that brings up a really good point where it's like when you're working for a corporation, you're working for yourself, and ultimately you decide your timeline. When you work for an agency, you're also deciding the timeline, but there's also that added factor of somebody's paying for your services.
Right.
So you want to get it done in like a timely manner.
Right. I also feel like from an agency perspective, your workflow from the day-to-day is it's not predictable, whereas in a corporation like Plexus, you were working on a huge project while you were there. You're working on that project for the whole time you're there, whereas in an agency, you're kind of like flipping between clients. Sometimes you may have more than others. Did you notice that different fluctuation in workflow, like at Plexus, was it more working on not the same tasks, but when you walked in, you kind of knew what you were looking for to do in the day, whereas at the DMC, it's kind of you're working on different things?
Yeah, I mean, things can come up, with any job where it was like, oh, somebody comes up to you and it's like, oh, can you help me out with this post? Can you write copy? So things like that can pop up throughout the day, but I feel like, generally going into each day, you have a pretty good idea of what you're going to be doing that day, because you've been working on the same thing usually for a bit.
Comparing the two opportunities that you had, and Megan comparing the work that we've done at the clinic and talking to other corporations, what do you guys think that you would prefer out of college? Would you prefer to go in terms of pacing? Would you prefer the faster paced agency life or the more consistent corporate life?
Yeah, I mean, I think both have like really good pros,
Mhm.
and there's always cons to
Yeah.
every job. And I think I love like the variety that a agency brings,
Mhm.
but I also love like the culture that you're like working for a particular business,
Right.
and like for who you're also working for at a corporation. And so I think I'm definitely open to both. I think, yeah, both would be great
Mhm.
opportunities. I can't say for sure one or the other right now.
Yeah.
But just like working in like an agency type setup,
Mhm.
I definitely have enjoyed it. So definitely would probably look for that. But definitely open for corporation as well for sure.
Yeah, what I enjoy about working for corporate is that optimization that it is kind of going on, just like everyone working towards the same thing, the same
Mhm.
projects, and that has a lot to do with timing, but then it's also just a lot of, again, that culture, so everyone coming together to work towards a common goal, which is to make something as best as it can
Mhm.
be. And then when you're working for an agency, it's more, I feel, you're working kind of by yourself in a way to like
Mhm.
make it the best that it can be. Um, so that's also another added factor too, is what is your goal in terms of how, like, what's your work style?
Mhm.
You know, are you more team? And that's not to say that there's no collaboration in agencies. There absolutely is.
Right.
But would you rather work in an environment where it's more of that team going towards the same goal,
Mhm.
or your individual thing?
Yeah,
If that
Yeah.
makes sense.
for sure. Yeah, and also just like corporation, it's like you
Mhm.
can see the work that you're doing being put into place, and it
Mhm.
then can like affect you long term. Whereas agency, you are working, you're outsourcing for like other companies, and sometimes you're working with
Mhm.
other marketing agencies and their marketing team, and you aren't like personally affected by the work that you do.
Mhm.
So it can be very meaningful when you like are working for a corporation because you're seeing and you're being affected by what you're doing.
Yeah. The way I've been seeing it, when you're working for a corporation, it's more about like building the brand and following your long-term progress of a project. Whereas like at the digital marketing clinic, I know this isn't true for all agencies, but we only get 20 hours with clients, so it's really hard to like put something in place and see how it affects and like how the client's business has grown. So I know in an actual agency, some projects are longer term, but corporate in corporate workflow, I feel like you get to see more of those analytics about like what you're doing, whereas agency you get more experiences, like different problems to solve.
Mhm.
Yeah, definitely agree with that. And also just obviously it's different for every agency,
Mhm.
but a lot of times they'll book them for like a certain amount of hours, whether it be 120 hours or 50 or what
Yeah.
or more. And you might have them. The goal is to have them long term, but
Mhm.
it's also you never know if they want to come back to you
Right.
or they want to go somewhere else, or if they can afford to like keep coming back to you. Whereas corporation, you are working for them, so
Mhm.
you know that you're going to continue. So
One other big thing to think about when thinking about the environment of your workplace is the team that you're going to be working on. So I know we've had some graduates here from the digital marketing clinic who join a corporation and they're a lone marketer on the marketing team. Or we've had others that graduate and they're part of a full team of marketers that are working for like a corporation and they have just a larger bandwidth. What where are your heads kind of at? Would you prefer to be on that bigger team or a smaller team, and like how does that influence the jobs you want to be applying for?
yeah, I think it's a really cool opportunity to like go right out of college and be able to just like be the marketing team
Mhm.
as yourself. But I also think that can be very stressful, and a lot of people don't realize how much marketers do for a company
Right.
and how many things that they are then tasked with. And I think that overall you need a bigger team.
Mhm.
You can't just have one. You need to allocate money to like grow your marketing department, because it's super important. And once companies realize that, then they would realize that they need to hire more than just one person.
Right.
So I think just because of how much you would be able to do working with a team rather than one person, I feel like me personally, I would prefer working with, like a group of people, just so I know that we could produce the best work instead of trying to do everything by myself and produce, like good work instead of like amazing work, because I just didn't have the time.
Right. I feel like there's a lot to be said about being that lone marketer, because then you kind of have control over like
Everything.
every avenue that you're
Yeah.
working in, which could be interesting if you have like that creative mind and like are really driven. I can see how that's a lot of fun, but for me, especially just entering the workforce, I feel like that'd be a lot of pressure and like so much to handle as a fresh worker in the workforce. So I am also leaning more towards that team dynamic, but I think there is a lot to be said about being that lone marketer and having all that creative freedom.
I would hate to be a lone marketer personally. There's no one to cross-check. There's no one to, and at the end of the day, like, we're all good at different things. Like, working for that team, you have somebody who's good at like data analytics, or you have somebody who's more of a graphic designer, and in the same, like, you have somebody who might be really good at writing like copy for social media posts. So it's just like everyone is good at something, and everyone can collaborate and check each other and offer their ideas and ultimately create a much better result. And again, being the sole person, you're not gonna have that. This isn't a diss at sole marketers, you guys do a great job, but like, I just feel like for me personally, I want someone there to like verify and see things from a different lens, like, yeah, this is a good direction to be taking this in, or maybe we need to think about something else, and they can bring up thoughts that I wouldn't think about by myself.
Yeah, for sure. The collaboration that you mentioned is super, super important, because if you're the only marketer, then you have to go to different departments, for input, and they won't necessarily know, what is best practice, or, they might not have touched on anything that you're like asking about. So then you might have to like outsource, to different agency or something like that, instead of being able to like internally figure out the problem.
I think there is a lot to be said about that collaboration angle, and I know as AI is being developed, you can go to AI and ask for those collaborative advice pieces if you are a lone marketer, but I just don't think that compares to having another person there that probably knows your client as well, especially if you're working in an agency. You're familiar with other people's clients, so I feel like that would also help provide some better advice. So I definitely think, from my angle, I would like to be on that marketing team before I dive into being that solo marketer.
For sure. But props to those that are doing
Props
it
to those. It's not an easy task.
Yep, snaps.
One fundamental difference between working at an agency versus working at a corporation is who you're working for. At an agency, you're getting paid by the client, and at a corporation, you're working for the higher ups at the business, and that'll change the way you work to prove the value of your department. My question for you guys is, how does knowing that change the approach at your work? So like proving your value to the client versus proving your value to the higher ups at your corporation.
Working in the agency and just having your clients either be the business owner themselves, or it can also be a marketing team that you're collaborating with, and then the marketing team will present it to their boss, or whoever above them, and so it can really differ how you present it. But obviously the marketing team, they're going to want to know the numbers. They're going to want to see all the details of, how did you get to where you got to make these decisions. Whereas, if you're just presenting it to a boss or VP or anything like that, super high up, they're not going to really want to see all the details. They're just going to want to see the main things. Is what you're doing working? And is it bringing dollar signs? Is it bringing customers? Is it bringing revenue? So that's what you're going to want to show them is are you getting that ROI, and versus all the different channels and all the different decisions that you're making. You're going to want to show lower on the team, and just like the marketing team in general. So
yeah, I think that the biggest thing when I think of like stakeholders is metric reporting.
Mm-hmm.
What I would report to like my marketing manager would not be the same as what you would report to like executives
Right.
or like a company-wide meeting. It's just not the same because you have to think of it in a more general way. Like
Mm-hmm.
Megan was saying, what brings in the dollar signs, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then also like maybe it's not ROI, maybe it's a different kind of metric that you can report, and that's different from company to company what people value.
Yeah. I remember when we toured Plexus, Ella, you guys were talking about how when you are reporting, you think about who you're reporting to first, and you kind of have different levels to the type of reports that you give. Can you kind of shed some light on that and kind of cover a little bit about that?
A lot of the times it's from different dashboards, right? Like you
Mhm.
go into Power BI and you have your separate dashboards that you all use for different things. And I think about how many dashboards we had alone. We had a dashboard that was literally just for like executive reporting,
Mhm.
right? So it's just thinking about those things and how are you going to set it up in a way that's visually appealing and valuable.
I just remember you guys were talking about like how you have I think it might have been three, but like if you're reporting to your team, you do more in-depth
Yeah.
reports, and then if you're reporting to like a team manager, it's not
Mhm.
as in-depth, but
Right.
still has some of those analytical numbers. And then if you're reporting to a stakeholder, then it's like not super complex, but you get a good understanding of what's going on. All right. When thinking about your client relationship versus the corporation relationship, what does it kind of take to maintain those? So how do you keep the client thinking or knowing that?
Yeah, for sure. Definitely that communication is key.
Mm-hmm.
I know at the DMC we have implemented like halfway meetings
Yeah.
instead of just emailing back and forth from like the kickoff to the final meeting,
Mhm.
just to make sure that everything that the client asked for or thought they asked for is then kind of evaluated at the halfway.
Yeah.
And you can talk about everything that you've worked on, the progress, and just making sure that they're still getting everything that they wanted out of our
Mhm.
services. And sometimes you'll hear the, oh, we thought I asked for this at the final meeting, and then it wasn't in your kickoff
Yeah.
notes, or it wasn't in something that you originally drafted that you had talked about. So if you get that question sooner, then you can actually produce that work for them and have a happy client that gets the work that they want. So
I never like shy, like when I was working with a stakeholder, I would never shy away from just like sending them a message and be like, this is what I have, am I like barking up the right tree? Like,
yeah.
And sometimes they're like, oh no, this is exactly what I'm looking for, and they're like, actually I'd love it if you could include something about this. And to me, it's a lot better to know that earlier on
Mm-hmm.
rather than like right at the end when you're like, oh crap, this is not right.
Yeah. I feel like a good word to summarize maintaining relationships is transparency.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like at least working in our agency-ish lifestyle at the digital marketing clinic, being transparent with clients has gotten me a far way. So just telling them exactly what's going on, making sure they understand it too, so you're not kind of dragging them along. It kind of helps them see the value in it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think just telling them cold-cutted what's going on really does help build that relationship. Whereas in a corporation, I feel like they don't always need to know the nitty-gritty details. We kind of brushed on it when we talked about the reporting, but as long as they can kind of see the workflow and like the benefit that's being added by the work that you're doing, I feel like that's kind of how you maintain that kind of relationship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and for sure, like working at an agency, you have to be, like you said, transparent, but just honest about how much you can handle and take on. I know for us, we have a super small hours, 20 hours, and depending on the project, that can be like 3 tasks or it can be 10, depending on the scope of the project. And so you just have to be honest with the client and say, no, we can't do that, and yes, we can. And sometimes saying no is harder, but it's what you can do, or what you can't do. So it's definitely important to have that in an agency, versus a corporation. You might be able to get extended hours or extended deadlines because you have that bandwidth to have that produce longer.
I feel like in an agency too, it's not easier, but in an agency, I feel like it's kind of the marketer's responsibility to tell the client what they don't know at times. So like if the client really wants to focus on their ads but their website isn't great, the marketing consultant needs to be like, hey, your website needs the attention before your ads. It's kind of easier to like change that scope and be honest with the client. Whereas in a corporation, from the outside looking in, I feel like it wouldn't be as acceptable for me to walk into like the stakeholder's office and be like, hey, we need to be doing this, and kind of telling them what I think needs to happen. What are your guys' thoughts on that? Do you kind of agree with that?
I mean, the environment that I worked for, I had no problem going in and being like, but at the same time, it's like all about like culture, right? And it's all about who you're going and talking to. I wouldn't go to like the CEO's office and say that, but I feel like that's a really big part of company culture too, is do you feel comfortable going up to your manager and saying, actually, I think that this would be a good idea or something like that, and you schedule a meeting, right? So that transparency from that lens is also really important in that setting.
Yeah, for sure. And also, I'm sure in a corporation, correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, you have a big department working on those things already, which as if a company is outsourcing to us, and then we create that task list, kind of like you mentioned, it's going to be one thing or the other. But for you guys, you're going to already have people working on both things.
One big thing to think about when applying for jobs is the kind of work-life balance that you're going to have and the compensation you're going to get at the new position. When thinking about work-life balance, it's not just the hours that you're going into the office, but also the hours that you're thinking about it outside. And that's a big piece to think about because that can take up a lot of your time. Looking back at the experiences we've had this summer, how would you explain the work-life balance between a corporation and an agency?
Yeah, I mean, if it's salary versus hourly, that's a big difference. I know working in an agency, because the different clients are hourly based, you can work for, all day. It doesn't have to be just like a 40-hour, which is like corporation, it might be, just like a 9 to 5. And so, you leave work at 5 p.m. and that's like your evening. I know a lot of agencies that we also toured, they kind of talked about like they'll work from like 8 to noon and then take a few hours off and then work in the evening, or they'll start work, start like a few more hours at like 8 p.m. And so I think that definitely differs, from place to place versus, depending on how the culture is and how it's set up. But
yeah, I feel like it wouldn't be unreasonable to say that agency is kind of like you make more flexible in terms of like when the actual time is that you work.
Yeah.
Corporate, yeah, I feel like people usually, like when they're done, they're like, okay, I'm done for the day. I mean, sometimes you can take the work home with like you as far as like mental capacity, but usually when you're done working, you're done.
Yeah. I'm kind of curious to hear what you guys have to say about this, but thinking more about the agency lifestyle right now, I feel like in an agency position, you're more prone to be thinking about or doing stuff outside of your work hours. So like I find myself responding to client emails like at obscure times of the night just because they email me and I need to get back to them. Do you guys kind of find that to be true? Or do you find yourselves taking time out of your typical personal time to tend to work stuff?
No.
No?
No.
Is that corporate, Ella, or like even when you were at the DMC?
No, that's like agency Ella. I'm not checking my client. No offense to the clients out there. I'll get back to you when I'm clocked in.
Ella's drawing the line. Fair enough.
Well, I mean, and I work every day, but I'm not like gonna respond to you at like 9 p.m. That's my time.
Yeah, I think if I don't draw the line of if I'm not working, I'm not working, then I think mentally I'm going to be thinking about work.
Yeah.
No matter what. So I definitely agree with you. I don't, just because also just having that like professional, just like them knowing like I'm not working right now, so they don't have the expectation of me continuing to email them at 8 p.m. where you might have that free time that one night, but you might not have it for the rest of the week. And so you don't want to set that expectation that you're going to be able to have those communications or finish projects, throughout the entire thing when you won't. And so, yeah, I definitely, but if I see an email at like 9:15 and 10 p.m., I'll definitely, it's like the first thing I do in the morning is respond to them.
Yeah. That's my problem, is I tend to like check my email on my phone and such like after work or
Mhm.
just when I'm going about my life, and then I see an email from a client or something that I need to address the next day or in a few coming days, and it just stays on my mind, and like I'm thinking about it like throughout my personal time. Um, I feel like that's something to consider when looking at jobs. Like, do you think that it's gonna invade your personal time? Are you gonna allow that to happen, or would you prefer like a more corporate job? I know it wasn't. I know your schedule wasn't super rigid at Plexus. I know you had some remote accessibility, but I feel like at an agency, especially with multiple clients, to bounce back and forth, the schedule isn't as rigid as like a 9 to 5.
I mean, and this brings up a really good point too. I know a lot of people that I worked with at Plexus. Some of them had their work stuff on their phone, and then a lot of people didn't. They're like, I'm clocked out. I'm clocked out, and like they don't want to be answering. They don't want to think about it, right? And like my stuff for the agency, and I mean, when I work for corporations, I don't have it on my phone, and honestly, when I work for agencies, I don't have that attached to my phone either.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty good at setting that boundary for myself, right?
Yeah, I think depends on the person a lot,
Yeah.
because again, if you're salary working at a corporation, and you know have an idea, during dinner or something like that, you can work on it, because it's not like hourly based, so it's not like you're putting in work hours that aren't you're not getting that compensation for. And so I think it really depends on the person, what you're comfortable doing. If you really enjoy your work and you find yourself really eager to do something in the evenings, and just if it's like one task, then by all means go for it. But also it's very important to have a like work-life balance, just so you don't have that burnout, no matter if you're agency or corporation.
Yeah, for sure. Like, it's all coming back to your work style, right? And I guess that's what this episode's kind of about is, well, what do you want to do? And like, this just kind of like, we're encouraging you to think about yourself and maybe what you would prefer.
Yeah.
Like, me personally, I prefer, like, when I go home at night to think about anything but what I did during the day. Yeah.
Whereas like maybe your creativeness sparks at like super late at night,
Yeah.
midnight owl, and you're like all of a sudden you have all these great ideas. Like at least like jot them down.
Right.
'Cause that's
like
just,
mine doesn't, but good for you if it does, right? So it's just kind of about what like you feel is better for you. And if you want to be like responding to emails at like 9 p.m., I mean, like Connor, like that's great, not me, So it's all about you and your stuff. There is no right or wrong, right?
All right, and then one other thing that I think is important to talk about. I know we're not going to be experts about the compensation for jobs yet, as we're still students and we haven't been diving into exact comparisons, but thinking about the compensation, I've found that it's pretty similar. From what I found, agencies can be around like 50 to 60K a year, and then corporations are around the same 55 to 65-ish. And also corporations I've found have kind of better benefits to some extent. What are your guys' exposure to that? Do you know much about the breakdowns, or have you seen any price points floating around on job descriptions?
Yeah, I think basically what you said is what I've seen, especially having friends that have graduated in recent years and hearing kind of about what their compensation looks like and just like their job search in general. But from just like looking or just seeing job postings and through my friends, I've found that corporations can start with a higher pay, starting out for sure, and also just because they're more established, bigger company, they're gonna have better benefits in general.
Yeah.
I think that it's also like full transparency. Like, if it's safe to say, like analytics is super hot right now. Having somebody who can make data-driven decisions or knows how to use that software, that's very valuable. So if you're coming out of college, like, and you're in analytics, like, I think that corporations, at least, you're gonna make a little bit of a higher salary as well.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely depends on like what your role is, at your job. It can, if you're like creative, then you're probably gonna make less than if you are in analytics for sure.
Right.
The last point I want to bring up is I found that in agencies you can potentially get bonuses. this is just based on the clients you're working with. I've seen. Have you heard of anything of that nature, like potentially getting more bonuses at agencies versus corporations?
I don't know, like think about like holiday bonuses and
Mhm.
stuff that corporations have too. Like you
Yeah.
have, I feel like everywhere you have the opportunity to get bonuses, but it's kind of again up to the actual corporation. Like I know some companies where it's like the thing, like, ooh, are we gonna get our bonus this year? Like how
Yeah.
big is, like how good is the company? Are we getting our bonus this year? And then
Mhm.
some corporations don't touch it. So
Yeah.
again, that's another thing about company culture, and that's the cool thing about working in corporations is how different every single one is
Mhm.
from culture standpoint to bonus standpoint to like work style, you know.
Mhm.
Yeah, for sure. And also just like if you are working in agency, that bonus can also look like you worked with a client and they want to contract another 40 hours
Right.
throughout the year, so you were planning to have
Mhm.
that, but then it was added on, so
Yeah. So essentially, the compensation is pretty comparable. It shouldn't be the make or break decision maker
At this
of
point,
your job
like,
position.
a job is like if you get a job out of college, like take it, you know.
100%. Depending on the kind of company you're working for, whether that be a corporation or an agency, the structure of responsibilities is going to be different. Typically, a corporation will have different teams that focus on different areas of marketing or different areas in general, whereas agencies tend to have a person who specializes in a specific field but knows some general knowledge about other topics in marketing. Ella, at Plexus, did you kind of see this, or is this, I don't want to say stigma, but assumption false?
No, I feel like at corporations everyone's good at something. Like
How-
you have like your brand communicator, you have your graphic designer, you have your analytics person. But that being said, like the larger the corporation, the more opportunity you're gonna have to have something like that. If you're like
Mhm.
a single marketer at a corporation, you're gonna have to force yourself to be, and even then, like we're all not good at everything.
Right.
Like creatives aren't my strong point.
Mhm.
So like I tap in a lot, and when I worked at Plexus, I was really grateful to have the people who were really creative because I
Yeah.
could, like, if I had something that I had to do in graphic design or whatever, I could like rack somebody else's brain, right? And everyone was more than happy to help me, which is so awesome. But I feel like, you know, you can have people be good at everything, and that's another really great. Sorry, like I'm like going into something else right
Not a
now,
problem.
but it brings up a really good point that somebody had told me. Like, if you're going into a corporation, it's better to be like if you're fresh in the market, it's better to be really, really awesome at one thing and finding your niche than trying to be just good at everything. So that's like something to consider as well. It's better to find what you're good at and really focus on that being your thing and really developing on that skill and making that brand for yourself than trying to be like decent at everything. Because it makes you more valuable, right? Like say like you really want to go into like strategy or like funnel research or something like that, and like really just like honing in and making yourself that, you're gonna have a lot of value going in and making it known that that's the way you view things, and people are gonna see you as valuable for that and what you contribute to the team.
sure.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it doesn't necessarily depend on agency versus corporation, but I think it's just the size in general. If you're going to have a larger corporation, there's going to be more specialty. Same for agency. If there's a larger agency where they have more employees, you're going to have more specialty there. But I really like how you said just like hone in and find what you're really like great at. But I also think it's important to go into your first job with an open mindset to then explore other things, because there might be like you might find in college that you're good at one thing, but you might have only been like shown 10 different options, which is if you're working in a corporation, you might find yourself working on certain tasks that you just weren't shown in college, and you might find that you're better at that, or you enjoy it more than doing creative or doing design or like analytics or anything like that. So because they might have more specialty than what you previously know. So definitely have that open mindset and being willing to do it all until you figure out what you enjoy and what you're good at.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more with that. Like, I mean, we're still really like we are at the very beginning of our professional careers. You're not gonna 1,000% know what you're gonna want to do coming out. I mean, some people might, but like I sure don't. Like, and that's okay. You can like it's the time to explore what you're good at and what you like to do, and that can change. Like,
yeah, it's such an evolving industry, and
Mhm.
it's always changing. So you might find your niche now, but in like 5-10 years, it might look completely different. So having that adaptability to, what your job looks like fresh out of college is very important.
Like, I know a lot of people, like, even from the digital marketing clinic, they start in digital and then they get jobs in like sales or something.
Yeah.
It's all about that, and then so that brings up another great point of transferable skills, right? Every like companies can see like she had a job in like this, but what are all of those skills that would actually apply to this job, right? And companies actually come at that with a really good viewpoint, right? So never discourage yourself because you don't have the experience in something. You have the skills that you've gained from everywhere else.
I think, going back to something Megan said earlier, I feel like it really is about the size of the team that depends on whether you're a more generalized marketer or you can really specialize down. Like, going into the summer, I kind of thought in the back of my head, I've heard and I just believed that corporations, you're just more generalized, and agencies, you're more specialized. But I don't think that's the case, because like when we went to visit UL at Plexus, we really realized that, man, you do have like a web designer, you have people that do other areas, and like you have your graphic designers and things like that are really good in that one field. But you had a bigger, not a super large, but you had a bigger team to work with, so you were able to have all those talents around. And yeah, I feel like specializing is the way. You need to make a name for yourself in like a specific field and get really good at it, and that's kind of your staple. And that can be hard in like a smaller corporation. But I think there's a lot to be said about specializing. What position, whether that be in an agency or a corporate, do you think you would learn the most from?
I think both would, show great opportunities for both. I think having that, it really depends on the size again, because if you work for a larger corporation, you're going to be able to have that mentorship because you have such a large team, and they're going to be able to like help you out. And, like a smaller corporation, you might, be working on more things but have less of a support system.
Right.
Same thing for agency. So I don't know if I can answer that.
I think there's lessons to be learned in both.
Yeah.
I feel like from the agency angle, you learn more different problem solving skills because you have a lot of different clients you're handling with, all experiencing different problems that need different solutions. So I feel like problem solving is a key skill that you learn in agencies, whereas in a corporation, it's really about like that centralized brand. And I feel like branding and sticking to your brand voice is kind of one of the main lessons you learn from that, and like how to speak through your brand to your customers.
Yeah, I think just like the soft skills as well, just like communication, working in an agency, you are talking to all different types of people all the time. Whereas like corporation, it might just be your team, the outsource, and you're like the same 3 different groups. And so, that can help with, the trusting and like building those relationships. You might not have that with agency because, you're constantly working with different people. But yeah, definitely having that. I just know for me, like I've been able to, just like public speaking in general.
Right.
For both, I think you just learn so much, and so I think you get like great value out of both.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think, I don't really know if that's like an answerable question. Like you're gonna learn.
I think there's a lot of answers to that question, and that's, I suppose, kind of the point. There's not a right or wrong answer. I think there's value in both the corporate jobs and agency jobs, but you just get different things out of them at the end of the day. So like you'll have different skill sets if you're working in an agency versus if you're working in a corporation, just based on the goals of your position.
I think agency environments, you really got to prove how good you are at your job. And I mean, corporations, you do too, but
it's the different ways that you prove that, I think, is the key difference.
I think in an agency, you can get replaced a lot easier, is what I'm trying to say. And it's like a lot harder to get into an agency, in my opinion.
For sure.
I think it
Don't
is
go
too.
out of college with the expectation that you're going to get into agency because you do. I know, just because of like all the tours that we've been on this summer, they, kind of told us that it can be a great, aspiring goal to, if you want to work at an agency, but it might not be the first job that you get out of college, just
because it's competitive.
It's very competitive, and they want you to have a lot of experience just because of, how fast-paced it is and how much you're doing. And so going in with the long-term goal of agency, that's great. Maybe after your first job, if you work for a year or two to get that experience, then you can apply for an agency. But also don't be scared to apply for agencies right out of college, because it's not unheard of to have your first job be an agency.
Yeah. And I feel like there's a lot to learn from corporate that can transfer over to agency. So like if you are working for a really small corporation and you are maybe managing all of their marketing fields, that could help you figure out your specialization, maybe with all that exposure to like ads, email, SEO. That can help you find your specialization in the area that you really want to pursue. So I think there's a lot to be said for both. I don't think there's a wrong option or a worse option. I think it's all just preference and about where you want to take your career.
I think agencies are kind of like a really hard to like join right out of college, and it goes the same for like consulting too. Like it's super hard. Like if you're gonna just come straight out of college and be like, I'm a consultant,
right?
Because you don't have that, like, who's somebody gonna want to go to for consulting? Somebody with like years of experience in the field, or someone who is fresh out of college and doesn't have that, and then they charge the same rate, but like, so it's just kind of a hard sell.
Yeah. Today we had a good discussion revolving around the question whether we should be applying for agency jobs or corporate jobs out of college. And based on what we talked about today, I think it's up to personal preference. It's about where you want to take your career and how you want your skills to develop. So we thank you for coming along with us today, and we hope that through our discussions we help provide some context to you about whether you want to go into agency or corporate life.